Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Let's Program with Scientia, and we're continuing on with the timeline program because, as it turns out, it takes a while to do some of these things. So today, what I wanted to do, besides drink some water, which I really should have done between episodes but didn't think about until just now when I felt thirsty, is I want to adjust how I am handling this. Specifically, I want to add I want to turn this into something called a linked list, where I have my timeline event nodes. This is just parent. Actually, we're going to go with previous and next, and then I want child. Okay, and all of these should equal null for the record. Okay, so then when I come down here, where's here? I've lost here. Here's here. I'm going to make this right here and call it events root. So what happens when we add stuff then needs to change a little bit. And I'll need to think about exactly how I'm processing that, but I think the main thing that I have to do is change this up to return an event, a timeline event node. And why is this? Oh yeah, because it's supposed to be returning something. So this right here is going to go 10.child equals this. And then oh, okay, that returns a timeline event node. That doesn't make. Okay, so because what I need to do right now is I need to think about how I'm setting this up. And this is going to sort of make stuff. So I'm going to need timeline event node previous equals null, and then timeline event node first equals null, and then if first is equal to null, first equals 10, and 10.previous equals prev. If prev does not equal null, prev.next equals 10, and then prev equals 10. Okay, so I need to talk a little bit about what's happening, but I want to return first. Okay, and then when this processes the timeline, I need to go events root equals that. All right, so what's happening here now is I have the timeline. The way that it's working is it grabs the event node, just kind of like it was before. And then if we don't have a first event, we grab the first one, because this is what we're going to be hanging on to for a lot of stuff. And then we set up this thing's previous to point to its previous node, or to reference it technically. So its previous node is stored in its previous spot. If the previous exists, so if this is null, then it doesn't have a previous node, that's fine. If previous exists, then we want to go to the previous, and we want to set its next to go to us. And then we become the new previous. So, and then that should be okay, I think. I'll find out real quick if this explodes. So this needs to be structured significantly differently. The big thing that I need to do here is I just kind of need to set this up to sort of iterate over things. So the way that I'm going to do this, I think, is I'm going to make a new function called render timeline. And this is going to be can't type, timeline event node root and a graphics G. And then this thing's going to be called right here, render timeline. And then this is going to be events root and e.graphics. Okay. And the reason why I'm doing it this way is because what's going to happen is if this has a child, so I go like this. Yeah, because child only gets set if I'm recursing. Good stuff. Yeah, I think this should work. Okay. So what I actually want to do is root dot draw g font, and then if root dot child does not equal null. Actually, I should just go here and go if root does not equal null, or if root is equal to null, return. Okay, so if this node doesn't exist, we stop. And then I want to draw this node, and then I can just go render timeline root dot child. So if this has a child, it will render it. If it doesn't have a child, it just goes in here and pops back out. It's maybe a little bit more efficient to do an if in both spots, just that way this one, we don't have the function call, but it's not a huge deal. So the next thing that I want to do is just call actually, so it's going to be more efficient if I do this. So I don't want to fill up the stack with a gigantic timeline. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I might keep that, but I'm going to go timeline event node render man for no reason other than I felt like calling it that. Was that, and then let's see, while true root dot draw. I'm just gonna actually do it this way. If root dot child does not equal null, render timeline root dot child g. Get rid of this stuff. And actually, I can just go ahead and change this to while renderman does not equal null, and then renderman equals renderman.next. So what this is going to do is it's going to come in here. It's going to say, okay, here's where we're starting. And while the thing that we're looking at, the guy that we're drawing, exists, and I need to make sure I change this to be renderman. Otherwise, we're just going to draw the root a lot. I can probably use root instead of renderman, but I'm just using renderman for clarity. So while this exists, draw it, check its child to see if there's a child timeline to draw, and if there is, draw that using this function. And then otherwise, and then after we've checked for the child, we will go ahead and go and draw the next node. If that is null, then this whole loop will end. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. Should be okay. Should work just fine, hopefully. We will find out. But one of the things that this allows me to do is I can come up here to this draw, and you see where I have this draw line. Well, I can go ahead and add another one. Draw line, and this is going to be a black pen again. And our first point is actually going to be, so I want to go if previous not equal null, and I want to go int line. Actually, this can just be a point line. Start equals new. Yeah, okay. I'm going to do it this way. New point timeline parent x, timeline parent y. Remember, if we don't have a timeline parent, that's just going to be the root position. And then if our previous exists, then we want line start to actually equal. And I'm just doing it this way because I don't need an else, because I can just give that the default information if I don't need it. That's fine. So line start instead can be previous x previous dot y. Except x is going to be a little bit off. So I actually want to make this just timeline parent x, comma y. Our previous is y. And then this is going to be line start and new point timeline parent x, and then actually I can just go make this an int line start. So I need to obviously modify how this whole thing works for the other orientation. I may scrap the orientations, by the way. It's just going to be simpler if I don't have both of them. And I'm not sure how much I gain by having both of them is the main reason why I'd consider scrapping it. Actually, just thinking about it right now, orientation is going to be a giant pain in the rear end to implement. So I'm not going to. I'm going to get rid of this because I don't need that anymore. I don't know where I have orientation defined. Oh, I just used orientation information that's like built in or something. I don't know. I'm also clearly not going to be using that anymore either. So I'm just going to clean up things a little bit while I'm here. So if I don't have orientation, then that removes a lot of stuff that I have to do, because I have to figure out a way of kind of rendering this a different orientation if I have orientation, obviously. And that just adds a lot of overhead in terms of rewriting code to kind of like transpose stuff and recenter stuff. And again, it's doable. It's absolutely 100% doable. But I don't think I'm going to be served by having the horizontal orientation, and I don't want to take the time to implement it because of that. So one of the things that you need to do when you're making a program is figure out how big you want your ambition, how big you want your scope to be, how much you're going to try to do with it. And the more features you add, the more time and effort it takes to implement. And so it's really important to determine if you're actually going to gain a whole lot from adding a feature, especially if it's going to be a giant pain in the rear end to make. And I determined that this is going to be a giant pain in the rear end to make, so I'm not going to. Why did I make that a new float? Can anyone tell me? It doesn't matter. It's probably an autocomplete issue. But this needs to go to ry. Okay, so let's see if this builds. Okay, it builds. Let's see if this explodes. So I want to add some events. Let's put this one at 10. Let's put this one at 800. Let's put this one at 1200. And let's take our split timeline and put it at a good old 150. And then let's add 2 events to our split timeline, one at 25 and another split timeline at, I don't know, 400. Okay, and then let's just add an event at 0 to this split timeline. Okay, so if I come over here and I control T, this should give me, yep, you can see there's a line drawing on the side. So here's our event at 1200, our event at 800, up here's our event at 150, and there's our event at 10. And if I do this with the scroll wheel, it scrunches it down. So that's really cool. I'm really happy with how that's working. That makes me feel really good. So one of the things I'm going to need to account for is if nodes are really right on top of each other as well, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Okay, so then the next thing that I want to do is timeline overview all. Okay, so now this thing, you can see, this is really, really exciting me right now. So here's our first split, and we get this event at 25, and we get this event at 400, and this event at 0 off of that. So we can actually see how all of this timeline comes together. So something that I'm going to want to do is like make sure that this goes out far enough. And one of the things that I'm going to want to do is add a post-processing function that goes through and calculates out basically distance from the edge for when I have a node like this coming off. So it's probably going to be like a child spacer or something like that I'm going to call it. But I'm really happy. Like the scroll wheel is working the way that I want it to. I can pan this thing around. I can see stuff. Let's go ahead and name some events. Let's call this Blinding Rage. Let's call this Oops, I Did It Again. Let's call this Prophecy. Let's call this Universal Collapse. And then over here in Oops, I Did It Again, we have this lovely event called Second Thoughts. Never mind those second thoughts. And then this is called Third Thoughts. And then if I pop this up, we can see, okay, here's our names: Blinding Rage, Oops, I Did It Again, Second Thoughts, Never Mind Those Second Thoughts, Third Thoughts, Prophecy, and Universal Collapse. I can adjust my scroll to bring it all within the window. And this is really exciting to me. I am super happy to have this. So there's a couple of things that I want to do. The first one is probably slightly non-obvious, but I want to start the timeline position. I want to set the root at something other than 0, 0. The other thing that I want to do is kind of calculate some of those values for positioning things. I also want to get a line coming off of the end of this to the child position. So I'm going to go ahead and address those. But like I said, I'm really excited with how this is working. So if child does not equal null, g.drawLine, this is going to be x plus size.width, comma y, and then x plus size.width plus root.spacer, comma y. Okay, so now if we have a child, we should, I also need to add a pens.black here. So this should space it, or this should give me the timeline start nib coming off. And then if I go up here to the root, where is that? Right here, I'm going to just make this at 1010. And the reason for that is when I run this, so I'm going to just add a couple of things here. Let's put this at 30. And let's go ahead and add an event to that at 0. No, at 15. Okay. So now when I look at this thing, when that's at 1010, this gives it a little bit of space for the start. So that way this event is on the thing and I can see this timeline line. And now that is in fact drawing properly for the split timeline. So that way that goes out to where that line draws from. So that's really cool, and I'm excited about that. I can zoom this out to scale that up, and you can see the 30 scales much more quickly than the 15, even though at sort of the default value, they look a lot closer together. As I scale that up, they get further and further apart. So I am super excited about that. I actually want to. I want to do a really simple thing that I'm just thinking of right now. So I'm going to come back here into this form. And down here where I make those windows, this right here, I'm going to add a line. Text plus equals, and this is the specific timeline. So I want to go time plus equals space, or okay, plus. Sorry, I'm thinking through how I want to format this. Timelines dot selected tab dot text plus timeline. Okay, and what you'll see what that does in a moment. And then plus equals all timelines. Okay. And this needs to go dot text. There we go. Space that out. Okay, so that's going to. If I did that right, I'm excited about this this stage of things. Quite a bit excited. Okay, so I'm not sure how I want to. Okay, so because I know that the timeline is supposed to be sorted when I'm going through it, what I can do down here in the X position information, because remember, I'm drawing like my lines to my X and that sort of thing. I can come down here and I can go if previous does not equal null, if previous dot win dot raw value is equal to win dot raw value, and I'm using a lot of that win. So actually, I can actually just do this. And so if this is the case, if we have a previous, I'm going to actually just go ahead and move this after this. So if we have a previous and it's at the same spot we are, then what I want to do is take our position, add the spacer again, and also yeah, okay, in this line I'm going to want to tweak because I don't want this at timeline parent. I'm going to do stuff to that in just a second. But it's going to be similar to this. So I'm just going to write this and then copy paste it. Plus previous dot size dot width. Okay. And then I'm going to take this right here and come down to, where was I? Draw. So this line right here, I can do this. If, okay, yeah, that's part of previous is not equal null, actually. Okay, so I can add some stuff in here. So I want to add, let's see, connecting line start equals timeline parent X. If we have the previous, and if previous dot win dot raw value is equal to win dot raw value, then what I want to do is connecting line start should go ahead and equal previous dot X plus previous dot size dot width plus root dot spacer. Yeah, it's lowercase r. here. Okay, so then what I want to do is this line. I'm just going to start labeling some lines. So this right here is timeline line. This is connecting line. This is name, and this is child timeline connecting line. Okay, so this connecting line right here, I want to adjust its start based upon if I have basically sibling at my same location. And then the timeline line, I'm going to just add a bool for jaw timeline line equals true. If this is the case, then that equals false because we don't need to redraw it. Then I can go if that, draw that. Okay. Just run the format thing again. It repositions it, I know, but okay. Make sure this builds. Build succeeded. Okay, so I want to add a couple events at the same spot. Let's put this guy up here. Let's add a standard event. 10. 9, 10. Okay, I wanted to arrange it this way, so that way the sorting put this guy first. So then I want to go in here and I want to add a standard event at 5, why not? So if I display all timelines, you'll notice now I have the timeline overview, all timelines right up there. Let's space this out a little bit. Sheesh, those are on top of each other. So these are supposed to be drawing a connecting line, but I've apparently flubbed something, so it's not. So I'll need to look into why. That's not working. But this is coming off of that, so that may not be exactly how I wanted it to work. Because this, if there's one of these, it should have put this like off of there, which would be confusing. So let's just name these for a moment. Independent event. Let's just call this splitter, and that's all I really need. So yeah, splitter is being put to the end, which is actually probably a good thing. Even though right here it has it right there. It definitely is awkward if you have multiple timelines starting off of the same spot. So I'm going to need to try to handle them in a kind of a special way. And I'm going to need to figure out how I want to kind of process that if I have multiple at the same spot. But for right now, you'll notice that this says all timelines. If I do just Control-T, this is just main timeline. And if I come over here and Control-T, it's going to be the splitter timeline. So that's why I added that thing right there, so it would tell me what timeline I'm getting an overview of. So the next thing that I want to do is, so something that I could do, now that would be really awkward to add, is to add date nodes or date indicators along the left edge. Just say like when it is. I could potentially try to add that, but that sounds really awkward. I might do that in a later episode, but for right now, what I want to do is try to figure out why this connecting line is not showing up properly in this case. Oh, probably because I don't need that. So let's see if that fixes it. Do events at the same time. Let's look at this timeline. Yep, now I've got the connecting line. So that's working the way that I want. Let's add a split event and then a standard event, and let's just add a standard event there and call this child, and this scroll over and call this splitter. And then all timelines, yeah, everything's right on top of each other right there because of the splitter. So if I come over here and I put this at like, I don't know, 12 or something, you'll see child is coming off there. But the spacing right here is currently not working quite properly. So I'm going to want to figure that out and figure out how to kind of fix that, because they should all be the same raw value. But I'm not sure why they're not getting spaced properly. So they should all be looking at their previous and saying my previous does not equal null, and our raw values are the same. Therefore, I need to add a spacer plus the previous's width to my position, my x position. That may not be chaining correctly. I'm not sure. I will worry about that later. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up for right now. I'm just going to get rid of these extraneous ints because I made those, no longer need them, and I can get rid of some extra parentheses. And so I'm just going to clean that up. Okay, so next time, hopefully I can finish this. I will want to do some processing for basically split timelines. Something that I'm going to want to do is determining how to position 0 off of the child node, because it might be a little bit more complicated in terms of the where 0 time on the y comes from. But anyway, next time I will add some more stuff, and I may, yeah, I'll probably add some things for tracking timeline dates, or at least onto the main timeline anyway. But until then, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.